Switchback corners are really tough to ride, either downhill or uphill, and I'm convinced they never feel that great, even when you get them as good as you possibly can. But let's take a look at getting the best technique for getting around switchback turns. So the first switchback we're going to take a look at is on a black section of the trail here in Glentress in Scotland. It's a lovely bit of track actually, but this is proper black. You can see it's kind of rough and loose, whereas over on the other side we've got loads of nice trail centre-y kind of hard packed switchbacks. So it's going in at the deep end really here, but I think I'll start with the first tip, which works for any switchback, and that is of course trying to look to where you want to be. Obviously you'll find with switchbacks, most often they are on steep hillsides where you've got to basically work your way across the hill. So often you're coming along and off camber and then you're turning across the hill and going back the other way. But the first thing you want to do is obviously kind of out the corner of your eye, know that the trail is definitely going that way. Because when I'm back here, if I'm looking straight down there, I can't tell if the corner goes 90 or switches back on itself. So hopefully back up here, I may have already noticed that the trail is going that direction, across the hill the other way. And as soon as I'm coming into the corner, I'm now looking for the direction of that trail on the way back out of it. It's quite interesting with the braking in this section, because it's not like a trail centre-y hard packed switchback. It's really predictable. It's not that at all. Obviously you've got a step coming in, you've got some rocks, you've got some really nice dirt actually, and conditions are really good. So I'm coming in a little bit quick, but I am braking hard into it. If it was a bit more predictable, you try and brake hard and early and come off the brakes, but actually you then start dropping down the hill, and then again you've got all these loose rocks down here. So it's actually, this is the hard part. You go from having a nice camber working with you right in the meat of the turn to actually on the exit you've got hardly any grip. Maybe if you do get up onto this little bit of berm here, you're good, but if you're anywhere near these marbles, you're sliding out. So you've got to realise that from this midway to coming out the turn, you've got to be kind of careful. If you try and come off the brakes too early and rail this bit, you're going to get it wrong, you're going to slide out in these marbles, so it doesn't really matter how good the start was. So like most turns, the better you come out of this turn, the faster you'll be for the next section. But actually I can afford to be quite aggressive in the first 2/3, and then I've got to be quite careful on this last little bit. I find uphill switchbacks pretty much as tricky as downhill ones, and probably more frustrating because obviously now gravity's working against you. Instead of braking, you're trying to kind of meter your power to try and stay on the right line in the corner. But also I can find if for any reason that power stalls mid-turn, you get that really frustrating feeling of just stalling and having to put your foot down in the corner. Or even if you're clipped in, I think I've actually done this before, I've crashed going uphill on switchbacks because you're going so slow, so you've got to try and do all the balancing and the line choice when you haven't got any of that gyroscopic effect to try and keep you upright. So really frustrating, but some of the same rules apply. Try and look around to where you want to be. Often you'll find like this, where it's kind of flat in the middle of the turn and there's kind of an uphill berm on the way out, but that can again feel a bit weird. If your front wheel goes up here, you can almost unbalance and lose your weight to the inside of the bike and have to either dab or fall off there. So now it's all about metering your power through here rather than brakes. What I'm actually trying to do is try and stay consistent through the pedals, and I like to use my brakes to kind of control how quick I'm going, even when I'm going uphill. And it's better now to leave your front brake alone and use your rear brake almost a bit like a clutch. So you're just slowing yourself down, keeping your balance above the bike. In these turns, I'm almost always just staying sat down on the saddle. If actually you start standing up, it could be harder to keep your balance. So sat down, looking around, using my back brake to control my speed and stay on line to come out of it. So now we're into pretty nice trail centre-y predictable switchbacks, although there is a pretty wide line up there, which I'll talk about in a second. But now I'll talk about body position. So I'm not really braking crazy hard coming into this. I might scrub off a little bit of speed here. And for that, it's always nice to stay flat on your feet. So pedals level, slightly heel down to get that braking nice and effectively into the bike here without pitching any weight forward. And then as I start coming into turn, I'm doing the look-in already, and I will then start to drop my outside foot because it is pretty flat in the middle, actually a little bit bumpy. as I come just to this last third of the corner, I'll definitely be dropping my outside foot, keeping my weight nice and low to try and find as much grip as possible, because it doesn't look that grippy there, I've got to say. It's kind of polished, kind of hard pack, and then a little bit marbly. I've got to be getting nice and low, get my outside foot down, and then it's flat coming out of it. So you might see in slow motion, I go from outside foot down straight into putting some power through the pedals, and then I can stand up and start using my hips to put some power into that rear tyre. On this switchback, I mean, it's a pretty wide open one, so it's nice and simple. It's not some crazy, janky, steep, techie, alpine switchback. It's nice and wide and open. But again, technique's the same really. So one thing to look for, when you're thinking about your weight low and dropping your outside foot and looking to the exit, if you're doing all of those things, you should find that your hips do the steering. So I do say about sometimes in cornering how-tos, it depends how you like to think about your cornering. Some people do like to think it's kind of simple, steer with the hips, and all those other things should really happen as well. As long as you're concentrating on looking, that opens your chest a bit that way already. Dropping your outside foot, your hips are going to dip in. So try and think about kind of the skiing analogy as well. Your outside foot's down, you're all pointing that way, and you want to twist your bike around the switchback. So you can see people have been going pretty wild and going way up high here, which of course opens up the corner. By the time you're now, you know, before the mid of the corner, you're pointing and down the hill already, whereas if you're on the inside, you're still going that way. So I can see why that would work. It's definitely going to make it a bit quicker on the way out, although you're still dealing with the same amount of grip over there. So you might find that as high as you go here, you then can't rail that corner any faster anyway, so it might not help you out. I'm going to try it out, and I'll give you my verdict at the end, because for me, it feels more tempting to kind of stick on the main line, but maybe go a little bit higher. Try and get up, get a bit more turned in, avoid those roots in the middle, and then see if I can rail the end of the turn. So I'm going to try a couple of options. I'll let you know what I think is best. I think it's a really close call on the lines. Actually going high felt quite nice. It was easier to make the middle of the turn, but I don't feel like I came out any faster than actually sticking on the inside because of the lack of grip on the exit. So say, I don't know, this straight isn't actually that fast, so you have to put in quite a lot of effort to go high on there, but yeah, it's a nice option. I do sometimes think, funny enough, when I'm riding my own trails, there's some really inventive lines. You can see where people's tyres have been, and quite often I'm not convinced that's actually better, being crazy and going way wider than everyone else. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. It's important to try and stay relaxed when you're dealing with switchbacks. It's kind of something that you can say about any type of mountain biking, I suppose, but I do find with these turns, is you feel so committed in the middle of the corner, it's easy to over-concentrate and kind of go too stiff. So try and stay loose on your bike, because with something like this, there are still some bumps in the turn. And if I'm riding like, you know, really gripping the bar, standing really firm on the bike, any of those little bumps or even the edges of these roots can catch me and kind of flip me off. So it's trying to stay a bit loose on the grips, try and relax, try and breathe, and try and remember the simple things of your body position, nice and low, look into the exit. It's always rule number one. And that is the way of really trying to master these corners, is trying to predict your exit speed that's going to work the best for you on the line that you are. And when you then let off the brakes and kind of almost nail that exit as good as possible, I think that's the best feeling you can get from riding switchbacks properly. We're in the rolling hills of the Scottish borders, and we're not in the wilderness of the Alps. So what I haven't found here is those sort of really tight, really horrible, janky, for want of a better word, really tight switchbacks where sometimes you have to think about rear wheel placement. But we do have a fence to exit the trail onto the fire road, which is kind of similar. And what you'll find here is the main line coming in is really close to this fence. And if I turn in here with my front wheel, obviously the turning circle of the bike means that the back wheel is going to get really close. And in fact, you know, I could start clipping the back of my bike on this fence post. So now you might want to start thinking about how you can pick your back wheel up and get that wider. So basically, kind of like using a really high line, you're trying to get yourself a bit more, a better angle mid-corner, and you can use a bit of a rolling stoppie or an endo to do that. So on the way in, mid-corner, I can still try and find a bit of a wider line if possible, and then I'm going to use a bit too much front brake, stick a bit of weight on that front tyre so it doesn't slide. I'm going to lift my back wheel up and twist in my hips and push my outside foot out. I'm then going to push the rear wheel up and round when it's off the floor and try and stuff it up on the bank a little bit. If I can get up there, I'll be happy. And I'll be coming out this corner nice and quickly, probably. What do you think of my technique? Bit ropey, I've got to say. I'm much more comfortable doing it the other way, and actually I find that it's not a technique that I use very often. I have used it in the Alps when you're riding these really wild, natural, almost like walkers paths up in the mountains, but in Shropshire, on my trails, I rarely have to endo around the corner, but it's definitely worth practicing, even on a fire road. All right, there's some tips, hopefully help you out with your switchbacking. I find they're actually pretty tricky things to get right. And I do always try to err on the side of caution with speed if I can, because just a little bit too quick, and if you slide mid-turn or coming out of it, you just lose your speed completely, because they're always flat coming out of them as well. So hopefully you can get practicing, but make sure you subscribe to GMBN for a skills video every week. Also, if you've enjoyed this one, hit the thumbs up button. It can get this video spread out to help a few more switchbackers learn their trade. All right, get out of here.